Good morning. I'm short, so hopefully you can see me. I am grateful to be here today to join everyone in person and online. I am Hannah Dormido. I am a graphics reporter and cartographer at the Washington Post. And today I wanted to share how I got here, like how it started for me and how it's going. So I started, does that thing move? All right, perfect. So I started in 2012 at the Financial Times. That's when my career took a different turn from traditional journalism to finally doing data visualization and graphics. And then 2016 for Bloomberg, and then now I work for the Washington Post. But before I go into what I do and how I got here, I wanted to introduce myself a little bit. This is me. I grew up in Baguio City, Philippines, a city that probably no one in this room or online has heard of. I have a little map for you. So that's Baguio City. That's where I was raised most of my life until I left for university. Manila, I hope the cursor is working. Manila is right here. The capital of the Philippines is so my hometown is an hour away by plane. So just to give you a context. And this is me. So early on, I spelled well, apparently. I won this. I was in 4th grade, and I won the spelling bee contest. And I think this is where kind of the writing started. I was interested with words and how they were, spelled and how they came together. And I started writing for the school paper, and I wrote for the English version. It was called The Twinkling Star. I don't know the relevance at this point, really, but it was called The Twinkling Star. And we had a Filipino version, because Filipino is a national language back home, and it was called Alitap-tap, or Fireflies in English. So I wrote for both. I don't remember what we wrote about in elementary school, but my career started there. And then I went to a private high school on a full scholarship, and it felt like journalism just continued to kind of haunt me. On my sophomore year, I wrote for The Shield, which was our school paper. And on my junior year, at first it was writing literary pieces about young love and feelings and high school and all these things that you try to grapple with at an early age. And then it escalated quickly. On my junior year, I became the editor-in-chief of the school paper and became one of the youngest EICs for the paper, and then just finished it off as I graduated. And this is me and my dad. So I decided maybe, journalism was for me. Took up BA journalism in university, but it was very traditional. It was print, radio, and TV. This was in 2005, so graduated in 2009. And the only coding, I'm old, so the only coding I learned in school was basic CSS and HTML. Because in the Philippines, that was kind of starting. That was it. Our online stuff was basic. So until now, I only know CSS and HTML. But moving on. So after graduation, probably most of us in this room, I was trying to figure out, where do I fit in this landscape? Do I do TV? Do I do radio? I realized early on that I was not made for TV. No, I couldn't do that. So I'm maybe I'm, made for print. So I tried my hand at, features. My first gig was an editorial assistant for a home and design magazine, where I learned very quickly that chairs had names. And it was a surprise, so Louis Ghost, and I'm what? But this was the start for me of looking at things visually. We had to borrow chairs and pillows and all that, and we had to create a scene. And for me, it was learning about colors. How do they work together? Is the composition right? Are the depths, does it work or not? And at that point, I didn't know I was being set up for something bigger. It was just me trying to borrow pillows and making sure that I got the right colors, or my EIC is gonna, not be happy with me. But then a year or so after, I realized that, I was really made for news. That's the pace that I really needed in my life, not even wanted. So I started doing freelance gigs, but behind the camera. Like, I knew at this point, like, this is not camera ready. So I did freelance gigs producing for Al Jazeera, mostly CNN, and like all these organizations that would come to the Philippines and like cover different issues. So here, like, these are some of the biggest stories I did freelancing. So Al Jazeera, we were doing a story on overseas Filipino workers from the Philippines going to the Middle East, and then this one was one of the hardest ones. So Al Jazeera 101 East was a news documentary about Typhoon Haiyan in 2013, when the typhoon destroyed so many lives in so many places in my country. And yeah, it's hard to talk about even now, but this was one of the stories that changed my life, and seeing like the destruction and all of that. And also this was a turning point when I realized like why maps were really important, and like why on a day-to-day basis, I consumed maps. I loved maps when I would see them in, almanacs and all that. But being on the ground and realizing like why OSM, OpenStreetMap, was important, and why humanitarian OpenStreetMap was important when everything doesn't look the same, changed my life. So we'll get to that a little bit later. And then a year after, I went back with NBC to cover the anniversary of like how is this area doing a year after the storm. So that's, like, where is Dataviz here? Financial Times hired me to be a web editor. So my job was to edit stories from the print to put it online. I had to do like method work. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar, but if you're doing print work and newspaper stuff, you use this app called Method. And I had to do all that for the FT. There was no graphics, there was no Dataviz involved for my job. It was like editing and like making sure that the tags were correct and all of these. And then at some point, they asked, is anyone interested to do graphics? So I was in Manila. We didn't have graphics coverage in Asia because the team was in London. And because, I was scared I was gonna lose my job at some point, I raised my hand. I didn't know how to use Illustrator. I didn't have experience. I was scared of Excel. Still kind of am, but let's not tell my bosses that. But it was like a scary transition for me because I didn't have the background for all of these. I just kind of had the eye for like what looks nice. I had the journalistic instinct of like, this is a story. This is important. Like, I have to tell this story, but I didn't have the skills to make it. So all of that happened at the Financial Times. I had editors who recorded YouTube videos so I could learn how to make maps on QGIS. So my toolkit started, like, how do I do things? My process started at the FT. And these were some of the charts I made a long time ago. And honestly, looking at them now, I'm like, I could have done better decisions, but I'm still very proud of them. This was when I was starting my career. And a lot of these appeared on the newspaper and online. And then at some point, Bloomberg News noticed the hustle in Manila, and they moved me to Hong Kong as part of the core Dataviz team for Bloomberg News. We didn't have a team in Asia before, so they hired 4 people to start it in Hong Kong to be like the hub for all of Asia Pacific. And really that gave me a chance to explore more of the tools, meet more people, like make use of like the data from the terminal and use it to my advantage because it was like a very powerful source of data. So here are some of the stories that I worked on. It was the first time I mapped the moon. And I didn't know I could map it. But I learned that people put out their process online. And if you just do a Google search or you kind of follow them on Twitter, they are very kind to like explain to you their processes and all that. And then I also mapped Mars for the first time. So these are like the highlights. I did so many good stories, but I feel like these are the highlights of my career. Like, I mapped Mars, I mapped the moon. I wasn't the first one. Definitely not the last, but it was exciting. And then I did a few stories of like, I love to use icons when I can, but it doesn't always work out. So these were some of the stories. But I really wanted to focus on like a few things that I'm working on now. So in 2020, I was one of the crazy ones who changed jobs during the pandemic. got stuck in, limbo in different countries because I couldn't move from one country to another. Had an apartment in Hong Kong, was stuck in Manila for a year and a half, couldn't move to the US because the borders were closed, and I'm like, what am I doing? But we roll with the punches, as I've always done, and here I am. So currently, I'm focusing on more politics stories at the Post, and US politics is a totally different game than covering international politics. If you throw me to cover elections in Taiwan, in Malaysia, or Indonesia, sign me up. The US. So I've been doing this for like 6 months now, and honestly, I had to throw myself into the well of knowledge and try to keep up with everything that's going on, and knowing that I've done this job in changing jobs and adjusting my career and just swimming wherever I'm thrown. I told my editors, yeah, I'm gonna learn. And honestly, day to day, I'm still learning, but I have 6 months under my politics coverage belt. I think that's pretty good enough. I've covered the shutdown, I've covered the debates, I've covered the speaker votes, the debt ceiling. So we got there, and as I go through these coverages, I'm learning, and I'm asking questions, and I'm bugging the reporters who have done this longer than I have, people who have institutional knowledge, who have sources in Congress that I do not have, and I just email people. So that's where I am now, but I was really hired at the Post to focus on cartography at first, but at some point, we kind of moved, specialties depending on what is needed at the time in the newsroom, and I'm usually just game. And here, I've started a TikTok account, which is a little hard. And I told you it wasn't made for TV, but again, there was a gap I saw a gap of where can we show our work more and where can we reach people? I might not be able to show them all my WAPO stuff, but if I can show them some of these stories have maps and charts and this is what they mean, then I will try that, especially after people left Twitter, now X. So now, whatever I do on the Post, I try and make little, behind the scenes or little explainers on TikTok, and I call it Chit Chart. So if you want to check it out, it's a little cringy because I hear my voice, but I try my best to kind of give people an extra, input on how did I do it? Which brings me to Exhibit 1. So I have 2 stories today that I want to show you bits and pieces of it, the parts that I worked on, and how usually the very polished outcome is not how it started, and it's, let's just start here. So this story, let's see if this works, hang on. Oh, I should have logged in. This is the problem with live stuff, but this story is, we made this story when McCarthy was still the Speaker of the House, and in Congress, so in the House, there are 5 families, so caucuses, committees, that the Republicans are part of. And this data is not easily available anywhere. They do not update their websites. They do not release the memberships. You just kind of have to figure it out. So what happened was, Mariana Sotomayor is our congressional reporter at the Post, and she's amazing. So we partnered, Adrian is on the graphics team with me, also on the politics pod, and we partnered with Mariana, because Mariana had the sources, Mariana had the understanding, how do these things work? And the challenge for Adrian and I was, once Mariana explained it to us, we had to visualize it so that the reader would understand, why does this matter? What is happening in the House, with the Republicans? So Mariana would draw us little sketches of this is how it works there, and then Adrian and I would sit with our editor and start sketching out. So I don't have the photographs. I couldn't find the paper, but so Kevin Ermacher is our editor on the Politics Pod, and one morning he approached me and Adrian with little notepads, and he said, okay, 1 for each, start sketching. like 2 minutes per page. It doesn't have to make sense. Just start sketching. Like, what do you think can work? Or like, what do you understand and not understand with this topic? So we sat there and just like sketched. They were horrible, but we sketched, you know? Like, it gets you going. Like, it gets those gears moving. Anyway, so this story here explains, you know, what is going on. I can't go through the whole of it, but I can share the link after. But I want to focus, oh, hang on, let me scroll down. So we broke down the committees and the caucuses into sections and explained them further. I made the little headshots so you see who they are. And the reasoning behind the photographs, like we don't always use photos of people because we don't really recognize all 435 of the House members anyway. 433 now because 2 are vacant. But if you add photographs, there's an extra layer of information there. Are they female? Are they male? What's their race? How old are they? That I could not necessarily write in all of my text, but as a reader, visually, you could gather that information without me digging into them. So you see a visual trend without me like going into much detail because I can't do that in every story. So, but I want to focus on this modified bee swarm, which looks very simple, but it was a pain. And actually, it wasn't the bee swarm's fault. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me. All right, and I want to show you, like, when readers see it, they're like, yeah, this looks simple, but oh my God, the process. All right, let me give you a glimpse of how this thing happened, all right? Oops. So how it started. So after sketching it on paper, I sketched my bee swarm. Like, what do I want to show? What are the possibilities here? So this here, the first one on the top one, I borrowed a code from Adrian. Yes, I had an observable notebook. I cannot write code to save my life. I can borrow code, but I cannot write it from scratch. So I tried it, and it looked great, but it didn't kind of feel like it was doing my data the service it deserved. So this was the sketch. We would share it on a Slack channel, discuss it among the different members, and say, like, which one calls to you the best? And we decided it was kind of this one here, but maybe better. So I went back into the drawing board, and I'm like, okay, how do I do that with the data that I have? So the data we gathered manually. We had to rely on sources. Mariana did the heavy lifting that Adriana and I could not find online. So she had to go to her sources and ask for who is the member of this committee that they do not list on the official site, because they don't list it for journalists. I mean, why would they? So here I used raw.js, and it's a tool that is it's free to use. If you're unfamiliar with it, try it. It's very powerful. But because we didn't have time to code it from scratch, so Adrian was doing other things. So I was like, I'm going to use the tools I'm familiar with, and then I'm going to go with it. So I used Raw and then Illustrator. So at some point, so you see these are my different families. So this is family 1, family 2, family 3, 4, and 5, and then ta-da, I moved them around, and it looked like this. So all the magic, maybe let's not call it magic, all the work happened in Illustrator. And it ended up looking like this. But also, I'm like, it's a bee swarm. It gives me information, but what else can I do for it to tell the story better? So eventually, we decided we're gonna add the little people, the little symbols, to represent each person. And then, because we want it to be responsive, I have to make it 3 times or 4 times. And the problem, this is where the problem came in, and I didn't anticipate it, which was now anticipated every time. So the publication time kept getting pushed because we had to verify data. And I used nominate data for this, and they update it every week or every couple of weeks after votes. And then when I was doing spot checks, just to make sure that I had the right people in the right place, Nominate updated their data a day before publication. So I could not publish the old data because I have the more recent one, and it would give more insight to the story. So here I was trying to figure out how do I replace each of these single icons, 435 of them, 3 times. No, actually, sorry, 222 of them, because they were Republicans, 3 times, so that I can publish it the next day. So I asked my team, hi, do you have a script? Because I work with very talented people, and 2 people came through. Artur, another teammate, and Adriana were like, why don't we use this Illustrator script? It was done by Sean Dellis. I hope I'm saying that right. But he has open source scripts that he has published on GitHub, if that would be of interest to you. And I used his script that replaces each polygon with a symbol. And that saved my life. So I didn't have to replace them manually because I had to kind of set it up and say, replace this with this, and then it did it for me. So our data source is Nominate, and I can share this after if anyone's interested. And then we released the data we gathered as open data on GitHub so people can use it because the data doesn't exist in one place. So that's one. So anticipate, a data update. I should have known that, but anyway. So the second story is more of a mapping story that surprisingly merged something that I do outside of work, which is more of like watercolor painting and making maps by hand, which I've always kind of wanted to do at work, but there's a certain kind of story that merits this kind of approach. And this project took us a year to do, not because it was like the hardest story to make, but because things were happening. And we were like bombarded left and right, but also the reporting on the ground was a little hard because we had reporters flying there, but also they were being sent to Ukraine. So we had to adjust. But this is how it started. So I would sketch by hand, and they're not the best sketches. I would just this is how I think it could look like. And thankfully, my editors understand what I mean when I kind of show them my little scribbles. I have a drawing, like a sketchbook next to me at my desk in the office and at home. And so this is how it started. It just kept on going. I iterated, I can't remember how many times. And at first, I was like, maybe I wanted a black background. Maybe I wanted a satellite image. Maybe I wanted night lights. Basically, I was trying to tell the story of the treacherous waters in Bimini. Why are the boats capsizing? What is happening? Aside from, it being overloaded, what else is there? So that was the struggle for me. But as I was sketching this, it just didn't feel right. I've iterated, I can't remember how many times. Suddenly, they're black and white, they're satellite images, and and at some point, I couldn't understand why it didn't feel right. And I was ready to give up. And I told my editors, I'm like, I have nothing else to give. And that sounds very dramatic, but when you've been sketching for months and it still doesn't feel right to you, it's frustrating. But then again, this voice in my head just kept saying, if you're walking through hell, just keep on walking, But then it occupied my head day and night. And at some point, I was like, I'm just gonna sit down at 11 p.m. and just draw this, put this on paper because I need to get it out of my head. And then it turned out that my editors liked the watercolor. I'm like, I did this at midnight. Can we verify the borders? Because I don't trust myself at midnight, but that's how it happened. I just needed to get it out of my head and on paper, and then it worked. So I started doing the other maps, and this is how it looked like at home. You see the little, here, where the pencil is, because I traced it, because I was scared that I got the borders wrong. So I printed it out, and then I traced the borders, because what if I get it wrong, and a reader would say, doesn't look right. So if it was artwork, I'll be more comfortable in, freehanding it, but if it's for an article, I'd rather trace it and, get criticized for tracing than getting the borders wrong. I'd rather have it accurate. This is me and my cat waiting for it to dry. And then I didn't realize I was going to show this to people, so I did not have videos. I did not have photos. And then now I regret it. I regret it. I'm like, I should have taken videos of my process, but maybe in the future. And then eventually, what appeared on the paper was very different because I had to style it. Maybe I should have brought it up. This is what we do with live. I'm going to Google myself, then I'm going to show you where that story is. Hang on. Because it's very different on paper, like it's very saturated, but then I did all the labeling in Illustrator because that will make it easier when my editors have edits. Because the editing process is tedious, rightfully so, as we need it to be, but also now I'm anticipating that there will be changes. So I'm not going to label them on paper and draw it every freaking time. So this is how it looked like. So you saw the very saturated watercolor, but on the story, it looked like this. So I had to adjust it to fit the feel of the story. We had a designer who worked on this story with me, so we coordinated on like the feel, the colors. We pulled colors from the photographs that were pulled by our editors. So yeah, so here, and then the map that I showed you is right here. And then, all right, so I have 1 more minute. So basically it's that, and I have to do it 4 times. And when you're working on Illustrator, please organize your layers. Finally done. All right, so I think if there were like a few things that I hope people would take from this crazy career I've had, or this crazy talk that I just like threw at you this morning, is if something doesn't feel right, like please keep sketching. There will always be that little voice in your head or a little feeling that like something isn't right. Ask questions and ask for help. I've gotten this far because I'm shameless in asking dumb questions, because that's the only way I'm gonna learn. If I pretend that I know everything, I'm never gonna learn. So I just ask questions. So our unique backgrounds, experiences, and skills are our assets. So I showed you the crazy trajectory of my life because whatever I did at the magazine, I didn't know was setting me up for success. And I wouldn't even think that it would ever set me up for success at that time, but now I'm like, yes, it started there. And even, writing in elementary school and just like being shameless of like, I'm gonna write something for the paper and get published. We don't know everything, and that's okay. And this is like, I feel this every day of my life, especially in the newsroom. We never stop learning, but build your toolkit so that when something is thrown at you, you have a tool that you know how to use and you're very good at. For me, it's not code. I'm very basic. I'm an Illustrator girl, and I use QGIS, and I use Excel and like tools that are available for me online. Find mentors and be a mentor. I've gotten this far because people helped me get this far. And I also put in the work, and I'm trying to pay it forward. So hopefully, like, this is an organization that could do that as well. And then on the hardest days on the job, be kind to yourself, to others, but most importantly, be kind to yourself. Because sometimes you get stuck on a data set, or sometimes you get stuck on a code, like it's not working. Make coffee, go for a walk, and then come back. Like, be kind to yourself. Like, you'll figure it out, or not. Ask questions. But yes, like, please be kind to yourself. And thank you for giving me the time of day. Thank you for listening and for your interest. If you wanted to reach me, I don't know where people hang out these days, so I just put everything there. So wherever you are, please find me, and I'd be happy to chat. Thank you.